Fear not the ever-present. Welcome to tonight's episode. I would like to speak about the inconceivable edge of thought. I feel that every generation, due to the environment, okay, pretty much I'm getting to this idea that in every moment of history, there's the response of the designs that are accessible. Then, if we look at reality as a designer, you can say every phase, every moment in history has a unique conceptual architecture to it. Now, there have been times in history where people have seen ahead, so as if we drive a vehicle, we can see further from the vehicle. Right now, I'm kind of wondering in 2019, when we look through the windshield of the car, the vehicle of civilization we're in, we see a sort of collective challenge arising. In some sense, we see many species. Fish swim together in schools. Wolves run together in wolf packs. Whether it's forests of Las Vegas or somewhere else, Birds fly together in synchronized ways. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen inferior animals to man's intelligence moving in karmically, moving in rhythm. Now, human beings also move in rhythm, but due to a sense of superior intelligence, I find that it has to be conceptual. We hear the drum of the subjects that relate more to our vision. So, stories are what kind of produce that collective rhythm. In Nazi Germany, something fucked up happened. But the reason I remember reading somewhere, it was, believe it or not, it was for a school assignment, I think, where it was that Hitler's kind of success was based on the mob mentality, and the mob mentality was engaged with because there were certain people wanting to fulfill a role, you can say. You see, existence has to have a value. Its value starts off individual, and then its value becomes collective. Hitler used the mob mentality, a kind of evocation of identity, which brought forth a sort of rage in the wrong direction. Now, I find what was going on there was simply a directing of attention to the wrong promise. Believe it or not, the subjective realm of the individual, it doesn't change only with the externality. It doesn't change like a hurricane is coming to, a tornado is coming towards you, and you're like, okay, my thoughts have changed, and you start running. There are ways where it's sensitivity to the eyes of the other. Now, whether you give it a religious affiliation, give it to whatever affiliation, it's the fact that in order for man not to be alone, there needs to be another, right? And behind his eyes, the psychology's biggest trouble is loneliness. When I say loneliness, I'm not just talking about loneliness. I'm talking about solitude, a sort of solitude that an atom must confront in being in empty space. You know, that sort of solitude, a solitude of existential and experiential position. You see, it's like who I am before I speak is a space I consider. When I speak, it becomes particular. To be honest, many things are just being witnessed as possible. Like right now, reality gives me the fixed imagination of an object on a table, but I can visualize this object floating. I can visualize the whole room being geometric. I can visualize a sort of disappearance of the object. Do you see? Like, so what that is kind of, it's dependent on the object. At the same time, it's dependent on the space to be something else. It's kind of like taking off a box from your head and realizing what you have depended on was a limited reality. A story of Rumi I will share is this man is reading a science book back in the day, like, I don't know, 900 years ago. Imagine just to find a book back in the day was like, you know, only the rich and wealthy. As if imagine there was a day where the rich came and like this rich guy's like, look at my bookshelf, bro. It's like that bookshelf was like a Ferrari, you know, in the garage, you know. But anyways, this Rumi is reading this science textbook or whatever, you know, the scientific kind of paper, and he's reading it by a water fountain. He's in his let's say late 20s or whatever, and out of nowhere, Shams Tabrizi, this very liberated visionary sage, you know, this kind of man who's aware of how the light is in his eyes. He comes to this dervish by the name of Shams, comes to Rumi and says, what are you reading? Like out of nowhere, the spiritual wild man appears, you know, kind of like a Pokemon, just a wild Pokemon appears. An outreach to younger generations, you know. Anyways, Shams looks at Rumi and says, hey kid, what are you reading? And Rumi looks at this wild, spiritual wild man, like, you know, dervish that came out of nowhere. And he's like, nothing you would understand, old man. This is the newest sciences of the time. Like, you have no clue even if I give you this book, you know. And Shams is standing there. And when you get to know Shams through his poetry, he's a very chaotic individual, his personality, because of the intensity of reality he's acknowledging. You know, he's a man who saw beyond the void and more, you know. So he throws, he gets Rumi's book and throws it in the water. And Rumi's like, oh my God, photocopy machines haven't been invented yet. You know, he's freaking out, you know. And he looks at Shams with a sort of like a shock. And he says, do you know what you have done? You have destroyed the newest sciences, the newest knowledge of our time. And he's looking at Shams as if like, how could you destroy the newest data we have as a species? Now Shams does something very next level in this kind of mystical story. He takes the book out and the book is completely dry and he gives it to Rumi and Rumi is shocked. It's as if a sort of something. It's as if his mind is shook. First his ego, now his like the presence of his mind. And so Rumi is speechless, and Shams looks at him and gives him a very important life lesson. He says, knowledge that can be wiped with water is no knowledge at all. So in some sense, search for that which cannot be broken and cannot be fixed, you know. The untouchable, the unspeakable, the inconceivable. I simply say that which is beyond the language threshold, you know. because it's the mind stretching. That's the crucial thing. Behind your eyes there's a stretching. Now on some level I'm doing something playful by saying, okay, let's make an inside and outside, within and without, but to be honest, that is not the, I use the name Mr. Within to suggest that, like, pretty much I'm asking what is it that's looking through your eyes. But at some point of going internal, I find there is no internal external. You revert to a singular dimension. So it goes from multidimensional singular to phenomena, no phenomena. I find this is a sort of philosophical reverse engineering of conception. It starts with a multidimensional permission. The multidimensional effect comes to a singular cause. The singular cause realizes it cannot have a cause. That's why I'm saying you shift from the dualistic kind of framework of selfhood. Most people are functioning with, let's say, selfhood, the program of selfhood 1.0. They think they're good or bad. They're trying to be something in a changing world. Or let me say it like this: they're trying to do something in a changing world, and there's some people who are. That's it. You ask the person, who are you? What are you? It shocked me at first when I realized it, but then I kind of noticed why. Why silence, it holds a majority of the secret. It's kind of like an iceberg where the majority of it is not in language. It's not visible. You only see the tip of the iceberg. You're not seeing the whole thing. It's not just with icebergs. Even with a tree, I find there's a reason they called it the tree of knowledge. A lot of alchemical thought, pretty much all esoteric societies will bow down to nature. They indirectly are, but they want the divine agency to have a face. It's kind of like this. You hire a divine agent. And that divine agent gets 10% of your karma. The phenomenal thing is the world doesn't turn just in front of your eyes. The world turns your eyes as well. It's kind of fascinating. Reality is kind of cool in the sense that you don't have to think about it. It's there. Do you know? If reality was a kind of simulation, you had to keep the simulation there. But it's something that it's alive on its own if you do nothing with it or do anything with it. It's like there's a livelihood to nature that surpasses a character in a story. I personally consider, love to be a divine phenomena as well. It's as if, believe it or not, it's like you're falling. Sorry, guys. I just remembered this memory of me in high school, and I was this extremely shy kid. And I remember I had intimidated myself out of communicating with this girl who I fancied. And it was because my mind was seeing a version of her that was intimidating me. It's like, it's kind of was like the same phenomena of, like, when you feel you don't deserve, you know? When you feel you don't deserve, you don't touch, you don't approach. Pretty much the reason I shared that is because, to be honest, it's the mind's romance. You have to step out of the romance of how it's like, on some level you got to see what your intelligence can accept, and the parts that you can't accept, which become the unknown, you either watch, accept, in some sense. When I say you become content with the unknown. or knowledge leads there eventually. To be honest, if I, it's about the newest idea that is ruling them all. It's about patterns in consciousness and in their movement. In some sense, it's like consciousness can be seen as a dynamic, unknown momentum. Many things are unexplainable. It's like, yeah, I was even listening to a Noam Chomsky lecture. He's like, that's one of those things where we have to kind of consider that it's the what we are is incomprehensible to us. There are dimensions to it that literally we cannot land in language. It's also, I find subjectively, in regards to the subjective self, it has to do with, believe it or not, where the attention is most comfortable. That means it's like if you go notice, in accordance to all the experiences you've had from 10 years ago, your ability to literally confront the moment, have an experience of the moment without interference, or it's like you're getting to know the eyes that are being your moment of being, and changes the lesson. For a long time, I didn't like it, but everybody kind of around me has concluded this, stretching from my family and close friends. Their profoundest metaphysical thought leads them to the conclusion that this world is a school. It's a school to graduate into higher levels of existence. Many people have thought this, many, and that's the reason I don't like it. George Patton has this quote where he says, if everybody's thinking the same, then nobody's thinking. Intelligence has to do with also the fearless of exploration. Because we are experiential creatures, that means you do require something to change to feel as if something is new. So what's unique is that every day we wake up with a new energy level, and with that energy level we go on through having various experiences, and it's as if bits and pieces of that energy is taken out throughout the day, as if we start off as a kind of, what is the term, rugged, like this kind of like block of clay, and as we experience through life we get sculpted. And the issue that many people I find get angry throughout the day is because they feel the world is not sculpting them or is not seeing them for who they are. Something that brings great freedom is to realize nobody will ever see you like your eyes see you. Who you see in the mirror is someone who nobody else can see. I firmly kind of consider this, at least the mind, when it comes to the probability of the presence of the mind. My imagination is like, you can say, experimentation for the mind. Often when something has happened, I've wondered whether it's from a subject, if it's in the linguistic simulation or not. The issue is that if it's something that you can understand, you will not trust because you will think it's from you. This is why I say sometimes we gotta we gotta leave the unknown as the unknown. And it's the unknown that approaches. And the unknown doesn't approach through like some kind of, fairy fairy with a gift. It's not like some Peter Pan level kind of stuff. It's simply the fact that you are a conscious creature. Your DNA gives you a certain way your intelligence contains the world. Now, if you don't update your own intelligence, if you don't wonder about its secret movements, its rhythms, its blind spots, then in some sense, it's like, what chance does your species have if the individual can't? Do you see what I mean? We are reaching an era where we have a lot of problems. The educational system is a couple hundred years behind. It's like, I don't, not a couple hundred, but like, a century behind. From the 1900s, evidently it hasn't changed. It's still militaristically influenced in its structure. That means we have to consider that at a time of war, of course, the educational system won't just care for knowledge only. It's like, just like how people are being conditioned for the economical landscape, the economical battlefield, as universities are preparing students. There was a time where it wasn't an economical battlefield. There was a legit battlefield, and the soldier had to be able to receive the order clearly comprehend it, and take it to the other, run from one bunker to the other bunker to relay the information properly. What I'm saying is, it wasn't, their educational system is not teaching for the sake of knowledge. They don't care. They don't care about knowledge. The educational system doesn't care, because knowledge is not just a giving thing. It's literally that there's 8 billion children, like so many people who, there are worlds of fascination behind their eyes, but simply there's no platform to receive it. It's kind of like having 8 billion unique singers on this planet, but not having a microphone. That's the issue with the educational system. The educational system does not provide the microphone. And it's simply because the whole curriculum needs a new scale. See, there's one advantage that oneness has, unification has, that no amount of separation and distinction has. And it's simply access as one moment to all. That means you, for example, right now, you have a physical body. This physical body of yours, you can choose to move it. Your attention goes somewhere it goes. In your mind, like oftentimes when I go in nature, I look around in the environment, then my mind sees me sitting somewhere. I see myself already sitting in the location, and I just walk and actualize it. Sometimes my subtler realms, my subjective reality runs faster than me. Sometimes it runs slower. Sometimes it's as if it's very fascinating. It's like I've gone through a moment where I felt that there was, the divine will was moving my free will. But there have been times where I've seen the divine will to, in some sense, as if it was never there. Do you know? That's why I came up with the concept of, we have to pilot our intelligence, because it's moving through various states of consciousness. States of conscious attention to the environment. The environment gives new commands, and so does one's inner reality. Your creativity is when you can acknowledge more than visual sight. It's like you want evidence, you want the past to be reconfirmed. It's like somebody telling Edison, give me evidence that you're going to invent the light bulb. And Edison would be like, what evidence do you want me to give it? I haven't invented it yet. It's the first thing ever. You want me to relate it to them? It's like, imagine a candle with glass, and the guy's like, no, I need to see evidence. And so when Edison invented the light bulb, that's when the reference point was established. It was an inner reference point brought out. This is why inventors I find are sort of strange prophets of the objective realm. Their mind has given a response. Primarily, it's that most people, most children's mind on this planet, unfortunately, gets battered into submission. What that means is they are looking for the solution, never wondering why the problem is there. You know, you don't know how many problems are temporary and they take our attention through the day. In from 2000, what was it, 2015, there was a point where I started writing kind of mystical poetry for myself. And I remember it had gotten to a point where I knew it was an emotion translating into thought. So you see, it's like when emotions come in, the destination of the talk is more clear, you know. And I remember I would have moments where I would just go to a coffee shop, order a cappuccino, and then hold the pen, and I would just put the pen in front of the paper, and lines would just flow. And there was a time where this was very strange for me. It was strange for me that I could control the valve of the creative vision. And it was only when I understood of these dynamic rhythms that occur behind our eyes, that the way the moment translates itself has a strange freedom behind your eyes. You know, it's as if when somebody says, "Can I do something?" I remember there was this show I was seeing. The storyline of the show is this kid wants to be a hero, but he has no power, and he wants to wonder, and he asks this superhero, he's like, "Can I be a hero one day?" You know, and the superhero's like, "Sure, but you got to be realistic, you know." But it was a search for a way the world would accept the individual. And I've been thinking about this a while, guys. And one conclusion I came, that the whole economic story and narrative should change. You see, it's like there's this whole kind of cultural shift occurring that many people, believe it or not, I got shocked. There's some people making 200K from playing video games. You know, I saw this on Joe Rogan, also a good podcast to check. And in the virtual kind of cyberspace, there is this kind of program where the person is a certain character, he completes a quest, and then he achieves something more or he gains the reward. Okay? Now society has this quest thing, okay? But it's only in certain structured patterns. And the issue is that how can I tell you? We have to set free the minds of the world upon the minds of the world. What I mean by that is that there are enough people. Imagine it's a group of 3 people, okay? three people, or even you can see greater geometrical expressions of this, standing apart from each other. And the whole point is, when one looks at the other one sees the other two. That means it's a way of first realizing where the blind spots are, fixing the blind spots, now adopting the individual system that works to a collective system potentially. Now, the collective system is one where the human being, you see this whole thing about political correctness happening, it's a good sign. It's a sign that the species is becoming sensitive to how much language is exactly showing reality, you know? It's like the superhero always should, probably after defeating the villain, after defeating the villain, the superhero, after the praise and glory and all this was done, the superhero stood in front of the villain's kind of defeated self and started clapping for the villain, realizing without that villain, this man would not be, the person would not be the superhero. Do you see it? It's like we think we have to punish chaos. We think we have to, in some sense, hold order 24/7. When we understand the world is dynamic, it's rhythmic, it's as if there are unknown winds of intelligence moving on the surface of this planet we're in. You know, the mind animates it in many ways. I can tell you that after running, close to 28 laps around the sun, I have lived and died through language countless times. And it comes down to how intensely your free will is holding conception. Fear not the ever present. Man has strangely unique tools now. And a lot of our attention is being diverted in finding meaning through the tool. It's really fascinating when it's kind of like I don't know, when I speak, I see this view of, believe it or not, it's really programmed. I'm not talking about nature and a sort of destiny written in the stars. I'm saying that every person I speak to, it's literally activation of a program. It's as if the way thought comes and goes. It's literally, when the thought is there, there's definition by its design. Its design is in conscious view. When the thought goes away, its definition is not. So it was, rather than kind of the person accepting a story of how things should be, it becomes mainly where every moment has a value to bring narrative. You can evoke the subjective realm any moment. Do you know? Sometimes when I hear music, I just lie down on my bed and just kind of close my eyes. And when I hear the music, my hand moves, my finger moves like a composer in alignment with the music. But behind my eyes, I am seeing a sort of dance of imagery. And in some sense, I play with geometry. At some point, I kind of wanted to, like, you really need to see what kind of hand you're dealt. And so what it means is you need to find a moment where you test your own mind. And this test is not a test of expectation of a certain outcome. It is the test of seeing what the mind will do if there is no order given to it. I'm telling you, I noticed something about nature. I respect and, appreciate nature to such a degree. Nature was, I could tell you, my first guru. the first intelligence I felt had a knowing within it that was more than an individual's dream. And here's the thing, right? If I said that we creatures at the same time, because we have free will, we see everything as is, we tend to not to actually. Do you know how many people in this world in their youth, they had a different vision of their life and they kind of ended up somewhere else? So it's like as one lives, they become reacquainted to the structure. Now, what does that mean? That means either you have to enter a new environment and come up with a new plan, and enter a new environment, come up with a new plan, enter a new moment, come up with a new kind of effort. Or you watch. You don't fear the presence of the observer. The observer that needs nothing or anything to be what it is. It's fascinating. It enters the dimension of just pure being. Pure being is mind literally has no intention for action, so it sees itself in the pond of still matter, in the pond of silence. Now take into consideration, it's very important, this metaphor that the mind is like a pond. Because what it means is things can be thrown in it, in which just because the ripples may continue, even though you might want them to instantly stop. There are moments where I see rage, and if I tell you, like, I've paid attention to what happens, like in certain moments where I've reached, this was years ago, but I reached, there was one night where I was ashamed, like my conscience was literally, I reached a point where there was such the remembrance of something. That's when I realized how deeply language is ingrained in our intelligence. It was a moment where I kind of, the rage was not from me. You see, it's like, here's the thing. When I say ideological possession, I use the word possession, and I understand, of course, the word possession has a religious context to it. I am kind of pointing to something, but I'm not. I'm telling you that it's like this is what happened. For example, in a moment of rage, I was not. It was literally like a past memory of incapability, trying to be able now. That's what I'm telling you. It was that the way I stopped the rage was I noticed my attention literally to that memory. So what that means is something had happened in that moment that had caused me rage. And the rage was caused because a sort of memory in the unconscious had come to the surface. That means it was as if something about the character in the story I was being challenged, that it suddenly remembered the past. You know, after you observe thoughts, the next thing is, to be honest, as they said, it's kind of like, and I think it's in the Buddhic context that sometimes emotion is acknowledged as a thought where you've paid too much attention to. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, you look at something, imagine it's like somebody, you concentrate on one object, and that moment where the person gets bored, it's because an emotion has arose. That means you might get fascinated by just paying attention to one thing. How many different dimensions will be seen in that just line of sight? It's like, for how long can the intelligence of the moment window shop for archetypes in the future? For how long can the costume games of the self go on? We are creating this future, a tomorrow that is not for a biological being. That means nature is being forgotten. That means, this may sound strange, but it's kind of like human consciousness is a resistance against the divine. It kind of follows this esoteric idea that the moment the negative and positive were kind of came into appearance, came into existence, was the moment where the mistake was made. There are some traditions who think they have fallen. There are some traditions who feel they have arose. You don't know, there was a kind of, I treat it as one of those Rubik's Cubes that's, I feel I managed to kind of solve it for myself, but it was this quote from Voltaire that I always wondered why, and Voltaire was an atheist. And he said that even though if there was not the concept of God, man would still need to create it. I wondered about that kind of quote he had, Voltaire, this French philosopher, this French writer. That quote was so profound because it was literally like the yin yang symbol remark. It was literally an atheist who had kind of noticed the white dot in the black, or the black dot in the white. So it was very strange, and I wondered why the Buddha said the middle way. Do you see? It's as if the extremes are too uncontrollable. There's a certain range that free will feels free. And so the study of the states of mind of man have not been taken into concern. And the issue is that, do you know how many people are experiencing various states of mind right now? The issue is the inability to share it. That's what needs to change. That no longer the inner reality fears the outer. That's what freedom is. Where if you pay attention, the roar of the lion comes from within. It's an original action. Do you know? And without trust, you cannot reach it. It's weird. It's like you gotta trust the bridge. What else can you do? Honestly, it's very strange. This is actually a new kind of metaphor I thought of right now. Imagine a bridge where this bridge is hovering in air. It has no beginning, it has no end. The poet Sadi suggested life was like a ball of yarn. It was like it had no beginning or end, like a ball of wool. And so I want you to imagine this random bridge hovering in the air, and we are walking on it. And this bridge is made of the dash between the date of the person that is born and the date the person will die. It is pretty much their conscious life. The unconscious life, there isn't much we can say. At best, we throw out known spears in unknown skies and develop and extract models. That means we have to treat life, especially objective reality, with the honor of a designer. It's as if there's a reason why you must take your shoes off at the temple. Because you are in some sense honoring the intention of that environment. It's like respecting the voice of an environment. you know. The biggest issue that we see, I notice, it's like this is the main cause of racism, you know, and any of the isms, like intense extreme judgments, kind of against something that's unchangeable, pretty much, you know. It's that the person believes the first world they see. They think what they see is the only thing that's there. And so, if in their reality they permit a sort of action, it's like a dangerous person. Would you say somebody is dangerous? Imagine somebody who was like this strong, like person. There was a box on his head, and he was randomly punching people in the room, but he couldn't see. Okay. It becomes more like, believe it or not, a performance when you acknowledge the inevitable. When you see the temporary component of life, all you can do, you're like, okay, existence is making an effort to exist. Cheer it on. And from another level, you kind of see the eyes that are rooted in the void. And those eyes are there. It's like if you think it's just temporary, that is a kind of different, a temporary being. Like death is different than non-existence. Non-existence is when you have fully become a watcher of the world. That means the eyes no longer need a world as a body to even have a character in a world kind of dynamic. The beautiful thing is that you have to imagine. Just imagine like in the film Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that martial artist. Like at the end of the film, I was like, this is some next level writing when the dude is like trying to reverse his blood flow so the poison doesn't kill him faster. I was like, that's a conscious being. He's, you know, reversing his current blood flow, you know. And so what it is you reach a certain state of ability where you see the mind, you can move it in many ways. You can pretty much hold the pen and draw whatever you want on the piece of paper. But after some point, you'll get tired of just drawing it all the time. What happens is you reach a point where how can I tell you? It's like the weapon of thought, the intellect is sheathed. It's sheathed in the observance of nature. That means it's as if like your ability as a being, even though you experience altered states, it's sheathed. It's like the being who doesn't have fear in this world. That is a person who when I say fear, not like the person is irrational and can't consider like something, like sometimes fear is important, you know, fear fire. You know, but I'm telling you, it's like this is a fear where it's an articulation, an attempt of the mind in the moment to take whatever the self appears as and whatever memories are in reach, and then to kind of move forth. I remember I would speak about in my earlier talks that geometry was a vehicle. And I remember it shocked me when I kind of read in this kind of ancient, I don't know what it was. Was it the Gita? It was some, or Srimad Bhagavad. It was this book that in it I saw the concept of a yantra, you know? And the yantra seemed like it's kind of like, let me Google it. There we go. Yantra in Sanskrit literally means machine contraption, is a mystical diagram mainly from the tantric traditions of the Indian religions. There's definitely more to this. Oh, they're used for the worship of deities in temples or at home as an aid in meditation, used for the benefits given by their supposed occult powers based on Hindu astrology and tantric texts. Okay, another interpretation of the yantra was that it was a vehicle. So it was the first time I was seeing this theory I had that geometry could be a vehicle kind of validated, you know? So the reason I say geometry is a vehicle, because if we treat the story of our life as if it's a vehicle it's in, if it changes, we don't get hurt. As if when you're in a car crash, you know, you are still safe. In a subtle car crash, imagine. So what I mean by that is that when you realize you're not the language your mind is using in the moment, what freedom do you find there? In those grasslands. Rumi would say, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there's a place. And when the soul sits on that grass, on that field of grass, the world is too full to talk about. So he says there's a place beyond duality, I'll meet you there. And he says when you sit in that moment, in that state of being, the world is too full to speak about, because literally you see how a self and other are momentary, are generations of the moment. The unification of thought and matter in the attributeless instant. Kabir would say, like there's this insane thing where Kabir shouts at his student and he's like, "Student!" And the student's like, "What?" The student doesn't say anything. The student's waiting, and then Kabir says, "Student, tell me, what is God?" It's like sudden out of nowhere shouting command. The student hears this. Mankind holds an invisible brush. Attention pierces through the inanimate abyss behind our eyes as a dynamic activity. What that means is you find a moment in this life and you're like, all right, life, I'm here. Let's see what it's about. And in that moment, you just look at everything you have been, everything you are, and even the wonder of everything you will be. And you reach the moment where I call it kind of like where you acknowledge yourself never being here. Now, this is not something I'm saying, I'm talking about it, I'm bringing it into light, but it doesn't mean you should go towards it. It's just a moment where it's a strange existential kind of conclusion to solitude. That means nothing in this world remains unchanged if it's a thing. You begin to hear the voice of the moment in you. You free your past from your attention. Because sometimes I'm telling you, in life you have to just honor the moment. Certain parts of the moment of experience are leaving. They are shifting. It's as if it's like a short visit from an old friend, you know? There's a story that I was privileged to hear in India, when I was in India, from a man named Mahatma Vijayanath, who I hold in very high regard. He said that Rama, this god, this deity, in Indian culture, he represents, I believe, the archetype of the perfect man. And so Rama was asked, like as if the perfect archetype of man was asked, why is it that human enlightenment is rare? Why do you say it's rare to be a human? And Rama tells this man and the crowd, and he says, because in the lesser dimensions, the beings are not conscious. They are still in the unconscious loops of nature. That means they are not aware of the question. And then he says, in the higher dimensions, the gods are receiving such offerings that they have the solution. They don't need to ask the question anymore. They are the solution. It is only man who can truly, in the human dimension, seek enlightenment. Believe it or not, enlightenment is a concept born in this plane of existence. The attention that observes light it's as if, who has allowed light to enter? The sight of man, the design of nature. It's as if the problems were built by nature and the solutions were also built by nature. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who we were speaking about language and, in some sense, how the person thinks to speak. And I told him that there's a way where the language comes first, so you adopt a structure and you just move comfortably through that structure, you know? But there are also ways where words don't appear unless the image is there first. If you notice, in most of my talks, it's as if I see something and then I am commenting on it. I have a certain different distance from my thought. The more distance I have from it, the various dimensions I can see through it. The more I am in the thought, I think I am the thought. Of course, I can't see anything from inside the box. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I needed a quick intermission there. Okay. A kind of balance of freedom and discipline is required. Discipline comes from honoring the past. Freedom comes from honoring the future. You honor the future either through just providing the empty piece of paper. It's as if we are in the game of planting trees that we will not be sitting under their shade. You know, that is the effort of the advanced communicator, that we are just trying to clear the platform. It's as if, think of it this way, there's going to be some next level pilots entering the kind of the new archetypes will arise that will in their movements, in their dances, shift the total meaning of all the traditional archetypes. Mythology will be re-evoked. We're reaching a point where we've kind of went down, and reached the bottom of the curve, and now we're coming back up. Now, when we're coming back up means that we went through a kind of, from the savageness of objective evolution, we came to the civility of subjective kind of law. And then we are kind of realizing, wait a minute, the mind is also going through its from savageness into a sort of gentlehood, like the ancient Greeks said, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. That gentleness is where the greatest renaissances will occur. The world is waiting. And the thing is, the attention, I don't know what the hell the media sector is doing, but it's like taking the attention of people back to nature. There's too many secrets still waiting, too many treasures to be revealed. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's this concept of a inner treasure revealing. And so what the inner treasure is not an object, believe it or not, it's not a subject. It's where the subject keeps the subject is like the peak of a mountain. Language at most is the finger of some voice pointing somewhere. It can never be truth. We're not language worshippers here. That's another way of saying that keep your distance with communication, to observe it. I find the smart man can hear the voice of others more than just the voice of himself. Here, let me say it like this. To kind of be smooth here, like the non-intelligent person only sees one realm. Okay, sees only life has only one. Like how would I say it? Some people just see themselves. Some people who I say who you can consider to be smart, they hear the voice of others. They're not just trapped by the ideals of themselves. They can see beyond their domain and sphere of how the world should be kept. These people I call smart. They can hear, not only they're aware of their own voice, they're also aware of the voice of the other. They can hear the voice of the other without their own imposition of substructure or whatever. So I'm saying that's the smart person, but the wise is considering, is hearing not just the voice of himself, not just the voice of others, but the voice of the world, which is the presence of the whole moment. You know, I am telling you, you are the whole moment. You're not just what's in the moment. You know, you associate, the attention is immediately originating, from the sight. You know, it's kind of like asking, how is sight, how is light becoming a character in a story? It's the media sector has got it wrong. It's nature is the unknown. Man can't trap himself in a technological box. It's like he'll freak out. In one of my science fiction writings, there's this concept I've created, and it's known, pretty much. There's a character which is this kid who literally is karmically in the ultimate position. So I've kind of created a character in a story who has already attained the ultimate state, and now he's having a kind of private tutoring session with God, with the creator of the universe, which is this bird, where each feather of this kind of eagle-headed bird is a universe, and the bird, and like that kind of bird god, I called it Farian, Farian. Farian, and it was like the concept of Farian's arrival. God was entering the mind of a perfected individual. You know, that's the kind of art, like this background behind the scenes of how the universe was designed. But in the story, there's this kid named Farda. Farda in Farsi means tomorrow. And so this kid goes on, and there's moments where he finds himself in critical kind of moments where he can die. But the kid doesn't have fear. The kid is just watches in those moments where he's about to kind of, something critical, fatal is about to happen. And what happens is, right before the dangerous thing happens to the kid, the whole moment stops and starts slowly translating geometrically. And the reason is because I've kind of created this sub character. I call it the Archangel of Geometry. And so this character, his name is Lord Mistos the Messenger, and he's kind of Farian's, one of Farian, this bird god's kind of. This is, of course, in a science fiction thing I've written. And so Lord Mistos appears. How would I say it? He's the message. So he's sent by Farian to kind of be this archangel that, like, he kind of protects him. And the way he does is he translates the world geometrically, and he has a private conversation with this kid, in this geometrical universe. It's kind of like, in my mind, if it was a movie, imagine like CGI to a point where visual effects to a point where reality just becomes geometrical light. You imagine, kind of like, how like the angel had a glow. Lord Misto's glow is wherever he goes, the universe becomes geometric. The ability to translate thought, design, image, emotion, eventually it's all, believe it or not, this is why the complex can be handled very simply. It starts from simple. Suffering arises when the world has gone become too complex before you've had an ability to understand it. The issue with it's kind of weird, guys. It's kind of like people are becoming more emotional as entities, as beings on this planet, as members of society. And because they're being emotional, at the same time their survival depends on a kind of mechanical, very firmly, hard, kind of complex structured system. Now check this out. You are putting an emotional person in a machine that repeats. That emotional person will struggle to keep efficiency, because the emotion sometimes is like again, like how the child is given a toy and the toy is taken. Like when the toy is taken away, the child's like, oh my god, where'd my paradise go? And suddenly when the toy is given back, oh my god, I found my paradise. That's the issue with the emotional intelligence. It's still gullible. It's still reactionary. It's still just stimulus occurs, and it just gets defined by the stimulus. The notion of free will can only happen when you realize you are aware that your attention is here. That's a sort of kind of, believe it or not, ultimate freedom. When life can just be life before man's voice. And it's the playground of novelty. So what does that mean? That means literally you can Google anything. You can look at anything and see the design. I think any person who can be comfortable with how the idea of themselves could have never been here, or in a sense they can be comfortable with it never being here, they get a freedom from the subjective realm where fear doesn't use emotion to build the firm walls of beliefs. Beliefs is how your attention is trapped in time. You have to release that attention from that moment, and the only way is that certain things happen to you as a being that kind of made you feel you are. It's like conditions are ruling the subjective. It's like, here's the thing: externally it should be ordered, internally it should be chaotic. So what that means is it's like literally externally it's a utopia, internally it's a dystopia. And because it's a dystopia, internally there's this like kind of endless effort of a call to action for the species, for the collective vision. That means it doesn't matter what atoms have come to assist the rebuilding of civilization. It's again following kind of the Tower of Babylon story. I don't know what it is. At this point, I'm kind of like, it's too distant in the future I can't see it, but it's like the certain things that I can't see far, I get an emotion at least. The story of the Tower of Babylon was pretty much bunch of human beings, not bunch, like all of humanity decides to build this tower to reach the gods. They are united under one language. Because everybody's speaking the same, they see the same. Because they see the same, they are united. They have similar values. Now what happens is they built this tower getting close to the gods where getting close to the clouds where the gods are standing on, and the gods see this and they're like, this is messed up. The gods lighted a tree on fire. And in a sense, they what the gods do is they pretty much make man speak different languages. They separate the language. They break up the human vision. And so strangely, we find ourselves literally in the aftermath. Like the same consequence of the aftermath of that story is where we find ourselves now. You know? Various nations, various cultures, various giant categories of how the minds of creatures are animate in certain environments. So what it means is either there has to come this effort to find one common language, which means an ultimate efficiency. Now, when I say one common language, this is not a language of like, it's like everybody speaks English, you know? This is a sort of design-oriented acknowledgement of certain universal phenomena. It's like, here's the complex thing. This is something that Carl Jung, if he had more time on this earth, would have probably contributed to, was to create the sort of atmospheres where the unconscious, collective unconscious, would be wondered about. And the more beliefs the person has, it's like literally you're indoors wondering why you can't see the sun, you know, like. Either we change, the language changes, or the world changes. Language is the most probable thing to change and be able to change. You see, you have a free will as a human being to do many things. It doesn't matter if you're sitting on a throne, you know, or you're sitting on the ground. There is an existential opportunity for experience to reclaim value in the moment. There is nothing more divine than the freedom of the empty page to rewrite the story of the moment. It was at first kind of trying to jump the hoops of what success is suggested to be. Then it becomes you realize your life. You realize you're alive. That's the cool part. When you realize you're alive, what does that mean? That means your inner reality, you can walk like a king. You can walk like anything. You can choose to remain a space at the edge of one side of the dualistic, of the narrative kind of dimension of humanity. And one side, you are endless power. You are an infinite, endless effort. You become like eternity, searching for truth so fast it cannot even be. It's as if light, the light beam that could not doubt where it came from. Welcome the photons journeying through your eyes. Pretty much, I think enlightenment, you can put an equal sign and it's how the light in your eyes is being existence. And we ride the rhythms of experience. The free will has a strange ability. The free will is, without free will, the concept of the soul would not exist. Imagine somehow this guy found an audience with God and he asked God, he's like, God, I have a question. And God's like, what is it, you know? And he's like, why did you create man? And there's a silence. And then God says, I was bored. Oh man, that joke might be too far actually. But of course I'm saying this that when you fight with language, you gain a respect for it too. When you realize nobody has your eyes, that then you become responsible for your inner dimensions, you know? I think any sort of intuitive or esoteric interest will eventually take the egoic construct where it's being looked down upon. It's like moments where things have to leave. It's as if failure wants to speak. It becomes a sort of, when I say this, I should use probably better words here. I'll say it like this. Things that come and go are blessings. There can be arguments made that an individual's action, is it the particle moving itself in the field? Is it the field moving the particle? When you look at people walking on the street, is it an individual intelligence moving them? Is it a collective intelligence moving them? Is there awareness and attention to similar ideas that other people share, a sort of collective identity? How is the attention moving? That's when your own attention of your mind becomes like an exotic animal, like you, like a photographer, are studying. That's when the pen will find you. That's when the fearless, the temporary, that which is temporary yet fearless, because it knows of the value of design. That means just like how a candle burns, every moment that we are alive, reality is present. You can see existence as the glow of consciousness. And this consciousness appears as this melting candle. And what is the best thing that the melting candle wants to do? It wants to just share light. What else? What else can the existential design do? So that's what I'm saying. This is why I remember seeing YouTube videos of billionaires, and I realized, oh my God, it's as if incredible wealth, yet incredible unsatisfaction or dissatisfaction. And I was wondering why. You have more than you ever wanted. It's because when life gives you a little bit, we have such eternal hunger for truth, evolutionary speaking, you know. That means, do you know how many of our ancestors saw a world and they're like, okay, this thing is here, this design is here, let me just keep going. Do you see that kind of continuity? You can say evolution is an addiction to continuity. But a better way of saying it is it's an attachment to an unknown future. You know, it's like certain moments you have to learn to hold on to things, and certain moments let go. You know? And certain people who their conditioning hits them hard is because they have held things when they were younger that they didn't emotionally feel they could let go. That means, trust me, somebody you care about, their attitude suddenly influences you, you know? It's kind of how Sadhguru was speaking about the kid that sits beside his father with ultimate devotion. That means the child's eyes open once. You see, this is why I think it's the most important thing is we must consider creating spheres of clarity, because the idea is the civilization is not evolved enough. There's so much economical hassle. Like I have this kind of idea that anything that a robot can do, the human mind should not pay too much attention to. Because I feel it's becoming automated. We human beings are becoming in strangely lazier. We're being lazier with less existential drive, and the main reason is because the story is inefficient. Children are waking up and what they're being told they are is not accurate. It's literally they're told kind of you are atoms in space. You are a cog in a machine. It's as if, how does science even believe in free will? And at some point there is no free will. It's a hallucination of electromagnetic fields or whatnot. It's very hard. Life is hard for an atom, guys. Simply because there's no life. It's just endless movement. It's like scientists, who was it? It was Neil deGrasse Tyson. Or let me not name, because I may be a bit inaccurate, but I think it was, it was Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan said, we're made of star stuff. In another sense, we're made of stardust. So what that literally means is that your atomic existence is ancient, but the way it's reanimating is modern. So atomically, you're ancient. And on some level, if energy cannot be created or destroyed, that's another way of saying we can't put a story to it. If we do, it's eternal change, endless change. The most common idea is that something has to move. Something has to move in a new way. There's this kind of story that this guy, this man who's kind of very self aware, he finds himself in this strange marketplace where somebody is selling real estate in heaven to people. And some people believe it, and it's like crowds have gathered, and the lie has been sold. Well, and in some sense, people are going and they're like, okay, man, I'm going to pay $3,000 for this property. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like they're just kind of bargaining. They think they're smart merchants getting the best deal. They're buying real estate in heaven. And then this guy goes up to the people first. He doesn't go to the merchant first. He goes up to the people and he's like, what are you guys doing? Why are you guys buying real estate that you can't see? Why would you even need to buy real estate in heaven? You're in heaven, you know? And people are like, no, man, you got a businessman's life is nothing you would understand. And people were like just endlessly kind of in this kind of illusion. Now what the man goes there and he's like, hey man, why are you guys selling heaven? And he's like, none of your business. The merchant's like, what do you want, man? You want property in heaven? The lowest one we have is like $4,000 or something, you know. This guy says, no, I want to see what other properties you have. And he suddenly gets this idea and he says, do you have a property? Do you sell anything in hell? And he's like, hell here. Well, I'll sell it to you for like $10, you know. Nobody wants to go to hell, man. That's why the property is low. The merchant in his head is like, what a dumbass, you know. He wants to buy hell, you know. What a fool! Like look at how deep the illusion is, you know. And the man's like, all right, I'll buy it. I'll buy hell, and he buys hell for like $10 or something. The guy buys hell, and he looks at the merchant, and the merchant's like, whoa, maybe I shouldn't have sold hell, you know. The guy takes hell, and he runs to the crowd, and he's like, hey guys, don't worry about buying real estate in heaven. And people are like, why? What do you know, random person, you know. And the guy says, because I have bought hell and I'm not letting anybody in. And that's it. Nobody needed to buy anything in heaven. They're like, this guy's not letting us in hell. We're automatically going to heaven. They all became friends of this guy who owned hell, you know. And it's such a madness. It's such a madness that certain desires never needed to be there. Do you know? That's the chaos of life. That sometimes the way the world opens up is that the eyes must let go of a certain amount of content they have held on to. To be honest, the eyes let go of the content every night you sleep. But because we want to live theatrically and dramatically, it's like, you know, we must consider death, you know. It's simple. It's simpler than language. That's what I'm saying. That's my primal point, you know. Now, here's the thing. I've talked about the mind kind of intelligence, the human intelligence being like a sword and shield. Now, I'm considering this subjectively. When I say the mind, so it's in some sense like expression and reception. Take it as that. That there's a moment that your intelligence can express itself and it can receive. Now I'm trying to consider this in that we need to create some sort of subjective gladiator arenas, you know, with a digital global kind of Colosseum audience. And the Colosseum audience, it doesn't matter what they say, we keep it separated, their interference, with these kind of, I call it School of Athens 2.0, a sort of kind of the minds of people. It's like subjective argument is kind of like virtual reality in a way, you know. I want to see how far the result of the mind's expression can go. It's kind of like they ask the person, why are you trying the impossible? And it's like, I just want to see what it's like, you know. And that was the great reason, you know, to see the what if possibility, not to forget it so easily, because everybody is, you know, mass running to the, you know, most intriguing mask of what is known. It must be seen as this grand sculpture that every generation of students that come, they have to reformat the ideas with their eyes. And this is not being done because on some level, the future, it's strange. The more the children of now who are being born, they're subconsciously feeling more powerless. You know, because the archetype of their ancestry has been, the light of it has been diminishing. You know, when we go back to mythology, like even for the artists, when you go back and see, like there were back in the day, people were polymaths. They didn't have a certain kind of solo view. Okay, I'm a specialist. I'm in this. I'm a specialist in that. They realize that it's not. It doesn't work that way. It's too collective, too integrated to kind of just bunker down in one part of it. You know, language is fascinating, but it is a design. Sometimes you move the design, sometimes the design moves on its own. You're kind of like a data processing creature, sensory data. You process like this, like organism processes data in accordance to its sensory perception and uses that data to sort of initiate a subjective positioning of itself that it constantly learns to maintain. That means it's like, before we get rid of the ego, you know, we have to slow hand clap for the incredible evolution of it. That means don't be so wary to run to paradise. Don't be so excited to get out of here. This world is here. It's a kind of fabrication of the mind of the cosmos. We're living in the thoughts of the unknown right now. And when I say thoughts, because the evocation was instant. Because if we consider it's from nothing and then something came, that means any word could have been written, any sort of pattern of effort, a movement of design of the universal sector could have been put. At the same time, we're like, okay, we start off with, you know, the light from this giant star, this giant sphere, entering this tiny sphere. You know, as if light is a communication between different sizes of spheres, you know. Hopefully guys soon I'm gonna preview something here. I've kind of decided to what I consider to be my first kind of official book that I felt like I've had so many different kind of writings that I've been wondering which one do I kind of which title do I choose, you know. And so there's a bunch that's coming. But the main one I thought I start with is God Likes Spheres. And it's pretty much my observation. It's like, whoa, a sphere? I'm like, really, God? Spheres? You put spheres in space? You really can't laugh at a sphere too long, you know. So anyways, guys, fear not the ever present. It's beyond the language threshold. So I guess I'll end the talk here. And if anybody has any concerns or ideas they want to share, pretty much I'm kind of wondrous about the why the unknown needs to be a voice. Why it has to be a personalized relationship with the whole concept of the temporary person getting enlightened is to get out of the conditional way it's to seize its temper. So here I'll make this a question of the night. Oh, okay. So hey guys, paying attention to the chat now. Yeah, that's the thing. Even if it's not nothing, let's say what we came from is not nothing. That whatever it is it perceivable? Is it concept? Like, can we put it into a concept? That's how unknown the unknown is. Is like, but go on, Idris. Build on this thought. So kind of like let's entertain it. What exactly? It's like, can we give it a subject? That's the strange thing. It's like before the objective origin, can we give it a subject? We really can't, I find. So linguistically, we're limited, but still, I find it's like when you reach a dead end, you pretty much walk back and find another way. I think it has to come from listening to the unknown. So kind of wondering about, okay, maybe seeing it in the sense that it's an intelligence beyond design. Yeah, that's the only way I find that it makes sense. It's something beyond nothing. Because our sense of thingness is based on some design, some sort of atomic structure or objective reference point. Yeah. So Idris, I'm done with the talk at this point. I'm just like sticking around for you guys. You know. All right. Let me check it out. So I'm gonna read it. All right. So Idris, you say there is peace beyond dualistic mode. The inner reality does end up coming face to face with us as an outside reality. Anyone can access their past. In a perception class of psychology, it was taught about sight that moving objects attracts attention. Here, ground and figure play comes into play. All right, I'm going to keep going. Here, ground and figure play comes into play. Another study shows that what people see in dreams is always within the culture or cultures the persona's been exposed to. Yeah, yeah, because it needs something, right? It needs some environment to be shaped. I would add the same is true about imagination. Like a unicorn is a mix of two animals that the person has seen or heard about. Okay, that's interesting. Much of thoughts humans accept as true comes only after their emotion proves it. Then the individual feels the thought as validity. I agree that an emotional intelligence develops before a kind of narrative, thought-based version of the world. You say Pharaoh's huge power made Moses struggle quite big and substantial. If universe will be infinite and forever, then the finite and time will not matter to the being of the universe. There's a truth that the strong sees and creates by designing the future as the active component. There's a truth that the weak perceives and is affected by it with an inevitable outcome. Okay, so Idris, I read your comments. I'm in agreement with what you have said. It's just now I'm saying what next. Let's say the person can get to a point where they're not a creature of language. What then? I think it's kind of like we should treat it. This is a thought I just got now, guys. Maybe it serves if I share it. We should treat it like the story of civilization and its history is a party in a room, and there outside of that party there is an empty space where people can hover. No, but not everybody has to be in the party. Do you know? We make the internal freedom secure by dividing the outer chaos. Oh yeah, Idris, I totally acknowledge that they were responses to certain parts. It's just I couldn't tell which, but I wanted to read them to kind of see what it was. But I feel it's strange. I feel it's either we figure it out or the unknown pulls us that way. Whatever it is, it's a new relationship with language. That's what I'm sure of. That's where the next 100 years is going to take us, a completely different relationship with how language is defining our experience. I agree, Idris. Gandhi was a badass, you know. I heard something messed up about Gandhi, though. But anyways, I think it's better. It's pretty much that he was against medicine and then he wasn't, something like that. But he was a yogi at heart, so I could totally see how he felt the divine will was there with him. That's a crazy thing that you don't find in many cultures. Only some cultures. The only one that it's awakened is well, how can I say it? It's kind of like how the world still has a freedom to be animated, to be like there's a freedom for the unknown. Yeah, that's it, guys. I don't know how to. Let me tell you, there in all these mystical traditions, there's always kind of like the illusion and the truth. You know, that's one thing. All kind of like it's like I consider an idea is deep that it's questioning the cause, not questioning the effect. an idea that questions the effect is maybe interesting, to wonder about how the future is going to dance. But to wonder about the cause means you're reaching a point of actually there being pure experience rather than indirect subjective kind of landscapes just filling the void. Okay, Idris, I didn't know if there's more to that sentence, but guys, feel free. I consider these chats as a brainstorming session. Oh, nice. Wow. Wow. Who told Rama? We're talking about deities like they're like our homeboys. It's like, who told Rama? But I'm actually curious to know who told Rama. That's fascinating. Yeah, I have totally entertained that lens of thought. Where you came across your thought the first time? Oh, okay. I thought it was a kind of. Okay, I totally get you. Yeah. I thought it was a method. Maybe I didn't know it was the name of the founder. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I'll tell you. Yeah, go on, go on. Okay. So when you say thought, I know what you mean. Do you feel like you want to experience a moment that is not your environment? Okay. I'll tell you something that Sadhguru said. It was honestly the first video I saw of Sadhguru. He said the content of your mind is not your choice. Okay, I am. This delay of live stream doesn't seem so live to me. It's like, I'll tell you this. Let me at least make the point because I brought it up. Sadhguru says this thing where the content of your mind is not the content of your mind is not your choice. What does that mean? That means that when I say the word apple, the image of an apple will come to you. It's like it's evocational. It's like literally the mind shapes the sound, relates to the sound. Yeah, of course. But I'm telling you, the mind like is not the imagination. Sorry, the physical, the objective realm is not just the subjective realm. You see? So what I mean by that is that, yeah, I went through a phase in the evolution of kind of how I felt I found my own writer's style. Was that I wrote a sentence where I felt okay. It was like I took my first breath. It was like I felt I had written something that was purely from my mind, that was not, that I felt it was new. That's the best thing I could say. Idris, I'll respond to your last comment in a second. Let me just kind of get through what I'm saying here. And I'll tell you this: enlightenment is not for a personality. There's no person who can be enlightened. What I'm saying is that there's a sort of conditional attitude. You know, I remember being in India and I was eating at the ashram's kind of dinner place, and there was a guy in front of me, and there was like a group six. We were six people in the group, and kind of sitting there having dinner. And I asked him like, "Do you guys know? Have you guys talked to Sadhguru or something?" And one of them was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Okay, tell me about that. Tell me about what happened." And the guy told me like he attended some event. The guy was like investment banker or something. Like I don't remember exactly what he was. He lived a kind of very classic life, and he'd kind of come on a spiritual thing. You know. He said there was a time where Sadhguru came to an event. He attended the event. Then everybody left, and he kind of had questions to ask about ask Sadhguru, and Sadhguru stayed and like talked to him for an hour or something. You know. And it's kind of like Sadhguru's kind of become like the symbol, like the queen, you know. That means it's like the business has taken over the humanity a bit. But anyways, I remember writing the sentence, "I don't want to live in a world that looks the same the next day." That was all, like, always remember. That was the first sentence that I felt was just from me, you know. I'm telling you, when you'll know when something is new. You'll know when something is new. Yeah, the guy was telling me it felt like a kind of like divine like moment, you know, to him at least. So it's like Sadhguru was engaged or something, you know. To find peace in a world that's in pieces. We need to recycle the archetypes of an inefficient civilization. Or if we can't change the past, create a new dimension. It's like many things are known, but many things don't have a voice yet. I definitely feel that a person can have experiences or see certain things that there literally is no word for. Idris, I see what you're saying, but there's also a concern for playing your role. So what I mean by that is that, does it matter if Buddha wore a hat or not? Yeah, I agree. Yeah, your attention burdens you to what it opens, what it brings into access. You know, it's like the kind of game of invisible minds, invisible societies. The true self is hidden because it doesn't trust the world. I remember my father was speaking to this mayor in Iran, and it was a situation where I believe it was my brother. He asked the mayor, "What do you think is the most important thing needed?" I remember he was studying sociology, so he was wondering about what is the most important thing needed. And the mayor said, honesty. The mayor said the society needs honesty. People distrust the external to a degree that there can't be stability. It's not just enough to trust the external only, we have to also trust the externalization of the inner value. So, what I'm saying is, when I give these talks, it's strange. It's like there's a feeling of expression. At the same time, as I express, there is a sort of space that receives simultaneously. Kind of like when the air in your lungs is emptied, now it becomes full again. It becomes empty and then full again, you know? How far can language take us? That's the question. So, anyways, guys, Idris, I'm reading your last comment. The entertainment of opposing and hostility shouldn't touch the transcendental man or woman. If the world still has a specific condition to it, I'm afraid language is still pulling the strings. Yeah, it's not that even if they share the proof, honesty is not sometimes the smartest decision. You know? It's like a ninja will testify to that. The issue is that the world is alive in many ways. So what it means is there's many ordered structures, many systems, organized systems, but they're all reacting, responding, relating to one another in disorganized ways. This sense of fragmentation, the sense of fragmentation of it's like I'm just saying, while everybody's living their own life simultaneously, there requires to be a collective narrative that is one that it literally the world it sees it's in doesn't have the problems, you know. So I'll tell you like this, that it's again, for me, I how can I say it? I said it earlier. It was about this thing where if you want to get to climb a mountain, start at the top. We literally need a new collective narrative that the being any moment can become aware of, in which in this collective narrative, the collective vision of the self is grander than the value, is grander than the value of the a drop cannot fathom the rhythm of a river until it's in it. We have to design We have to, the purpose of the free will has to do with design. Attention, the invisible designer, you know? Yeah, I agree with bees know how to be. Anyways, guys, thanks for contributing. I feel there should be a more efficient way. I tried Discord. I noticed either my computer has a problem or like there's an issue with it. So I'm thinking like, I don't know what other social media platform, not much of a social media guy, but anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.